Hey, it's Joseph59 here to show you guys how to make this rustic wedding box. And you can download a free set of plans. I'm just using a leftover skid that I have, and it had 5 pieces on it, which worked out perfectly. And so what I did was I cut my side, my front, and my back piece all to the same width, which is 4 1/4 inches in width. And now I'm just going to go ahead and cut everything to the right length just to start making the box. Now that I've cut everything down, you want to go ahead and do some test fitting and just make sure everything fits. Just keep in mind though, some of the sizes or lengths, at least for the bottom, in my case it ended up being a 1/16 longer, just because some areas or some pieces were a little bit curved a little bit more. So just keep that in mind, depending on what type of skid you have. Some pieces and thicknesses will be different, so you just may have to adjust things as you go. I just took my sander with 320 grit sandpaper and I went ahead and just went over top of the wood. Just make sure you don't put too much pressure on the sander because you don't want to take off too much. At least for me, I'm working with pine here, so pine does tend to sand fairly quickly. So you just want to make sure of that, just because you don't want to take it down and make it all nice and smooth. You want to keep some of the characteristic and the roughness of the wood. To assemble your box, I just used some Gorilla wood glue, just a little bit I put on, not too much. Then I used a scrap piece of lumber and clamps on each end just to tighten everything up. And then I pre-drilled with a number 8 countersink bit, and I used number 8 by 1.5 inch fine trim screws on all the corners, and then on one of the edges I used number 6 by 1 inch long fine trim screws. And the reason for that is I do have a decorative edge that is going on the side, and you'll see that later on why I kind of did everything close together. For the top, what you want to do is grab your top piece, which I'm using here 1 inch rough pine, and I know the top is not going to be 100% squared because of the fact that the box top is not totally from the skid. So in that case, what I'm going to do is just put the box on top and square it up as much as possible as I can do, and then just take my pencil and then trace all the way around. And take your top template and cut everything out, line everything up, and then line it up on your top piece. And what I did, because it is pine, I just used a pencil and just pressed a little bit harder in all the corners, and it left a little bit of an indent. And then I just took a ruler and just matched up the lines and just made sure that it was 6 inches by 4 inches. Use my square here just to make sure everything was all nice and square. If it wasn't, I just went ahead and used my sandpaper with 150 grit and just went ahead and sanded down just to make everything nice and smooth and then also square. And then now I went ahead and used my orbital sander with 320 grit sandpaper, and I just gave it a really nice light sand just to knock any of the fuzzy stuff off, but just to keep it so that we don't lose the texture look. To make the frame for the top, all I did was use the leftover material that I had, and I just cut it down to the final width and then on the table saw, and then I went ahead and used my planer and just planed it down to the final thickness and went ahead and sanded everything down to 320 grit. You want to take your top template and tape it down in position. To make the frame, I cut all my pieces out on the miter saw at a 45-degree angle, and then to glue them together, what I did was I used Gorilla Super Wood Glue to hold everything together, and just use a little bit of masking tape just to hold the joints when I went ahead and lined everything up by following the template. And once you do all the corners, I just let it set for a bit just to make sure everything was solid and glue. And then once everything was all done, you'll come out with your frame that looks like this. I just went ahead and added some Gorilla Wood Glue on the back. Then I lined everything up and just let it sat for a couple of minutes. And then I went ahead and pin nailed everything in with 23 gauge pin nailers at 1/2 inch long nails. And I just did roughly one at the edges here. And you just want to do one in the middle. And one at the end. And then because the paper is taped down, it should just easily come popped out like that. And now we got our frame. I just used some leftover scrap piece that I had left over from the offcuts, and I just went ahead and slowly cut it down so that it fit nicely in the back here. And I went ahead and sanded it down to 350 grit sandpaper. Stained everything already, the entire box and the lid and the back piece. And I just used Old Masters wiping stain in a dark walnut, just stain that I had left over from another project. And the easiest way I found was for staining this was to use just an inexpensive cheap brush to dip it in and then just apply it on, and then just use a rag to wipe it off. Because the fact is that it is a more rustic box, even though it's smooth, it was easier to get in all the rough surface, so it's easier to get in with the brush. And then once I let it dry overnight for 8 hours or 12 hours or so, to make sure it was nice and dry, then I went ahead and applied Varathane over top of it. I just used satin finish in a floor finish because it was left over still from many projects. And I just used a very good quality brush, and I applied 3 coats on top of everything as well. And I sanded in between coats as well with 400 grit sandpaper. Just went to the local hardware store and I picked up some corner brackets on the top and on the bottom, and some thumbtacks, some nails, and also some handle hardware, and then a latch as well I picked up. And everything came in brass, so what I did was I scuff sanded everything with 150 grit sandpaper, and then just went ahead and sprayed everything in a black satin finish with trim clad paint. And once that was dry, the next day I went ahead and just sanded the corners with 400 grit sandpaper just to bring back a little bit of that brass but not overpowering it, and just to make it look like an old rustic chest. And that's what the client asked for. And for the hinges here at the back, they came in black, so I just went ahead and just scuff sanded them down a little bit too as well. And on top here you see there is the name. You don't have to put a name, the client just wanted the name on top, so that's what I did. I just used my Cricut machine, but obviously if you didn't have a Cricut machine, you certainly could just take a font and print it out on regular printer paper, and then just cut it out neatly and then glue it on as well. And I'll show you what the inside looks like. So I just went to the local hardware store and got some window clips that they had, and I found that worked really well for the back here. And I just left it loose enough so that you can move it on your own. That way you don't have to use a screwdriver every time to loosen the screw. Thanks for stopping by my channel, and go to the video description link below for free plans. Don't forget to comment on this video. If you would like to see more of these videos, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.